I'm very pleased to welcome Robin Winninger with us today. Robin is the managing director of the Global Institute of Leadership and Technology, which is an educational company with the goal of putting education at the heart of every organization. Welcome, Robin. It's really good to have you here with the HR Observer.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
I would like to talk a lot about the role of educators in today's world. But before I begin, where are we actually within innovation in education and putting it out to the whole world? It's a very big, broad question, actually.
That's a beautiful question, but it's indeed a broad one because we can break it now into so many different core aspects, right, of how to look at education, right? So you could look at this whole dimension of credentials, right, which I think is pretty much lacking behind in every term when it comes to innovation, right? We're still sending paper degrees throughout the world. We're still waiting for weeks and months until someone prints out and signs something with wet ink, right? So this is probably something where we're really far behind in terms of what might be possible from a technological perspective, right? Just like to put a couple of buzzwords in the room, we could do this all with digital credentials, right? Be it with blockchain technologies or NFTs, dynamic NFTs, you name it, which would be probably a much better way of doing it. But for some reason, the legacy system still prefers paper, which is fair, right? Then you have the perception of the degree itself, at least in most countries, right? A paper degree that says you have a master's in, you have a bachelor's in, whatever, is being perceived much higher in terms of value or in terms of what you can actually offer from a skill perspective compared to what you actually can do, right? So there's great people out there on paper that probably are not high performers within their companies and vice versa. There are high performers out there that deliver massive value to their job within their industry, within their dedicated field, but don't have any kind of paper credentials, right? And then are perceived in a different way. So this is probably the part where we are lacking a little bit behind, but we are pretty good with the understanding now, I think, what needs to be educated, right? What's the knowledge in terms of technology? So just if you take the example of a business school, up until recently, most business schools were not really teaching anything around technology whatsoever, right? Because people were just like looking at it from the MBA or the business administration perspective. Now you see more and more MBA programs with a focus on AI, artificial intelligence, right? You see programs popping up that teach now implications of quantum technologies. You see blockchain programs being embedded in the management field, but also on the other side, which I think is important. Also, the tech degrees get more of the business touch to that, right? I think we're getting way more into programs that are not only focusing on sharing knowledge, right? One person in the room emptying their brain and everybody else tries to absorb it. It's now more going into this coaching aspect, letting people work on projects, trying to bring outcomes out, right? Every university has now some kind of like an entrepreneurship kind of curriculum where people can build their startups, right? And I think like on this end, we're doing quite a lot of progress over the last years when it comes to what we teach, but also how we teach, right? So we see more and more online programs being there. We see more and more self-study programs there. We see more programs for busy professionals in all different kind of fields emerging, right? Because it's like the typical thing. Since we have like this bachelor's and master's program, a lot of professionals, once they go out in the industry after their bachelor's degrees, are not necessarily tending to go back, right? And then like after 3-4 years working experience, going back 2 years full-time to university is, I would say, a tough decision for most people, or probably also like a comfort decision, right? Because if you're getting used to a certain lifestyle and organize your life in a certain way, you probably don't want to go back.
I wanted to just tap on the idea of going back to the university and paper versus what people could actually do. Isn't that changing though? Because it seems like there are a lot of people who do get jobs based on their own technical knowledge rather than based on their own, academic knowledge. So isn't that changing now?
Yeah, I think it's really depending on which industry you're looking at, right? So if you look at technical expertise, for example, right, or to put into like simple words, right, people that develop software, for example, they tend to be since ever more coming from like some kind of like a portfolio logic anyway, right? So nowadays you have like your GitHub library, right? And if you apply somewhere, you just like send your GitHub and say like, hey, this is what I did. This is the projects that I contributed to. This is what I did, right? Something that we also know from the creative industry is quite quite well, right? Where people send more their portfolios that people are looking at. But nevertheless, there's so many disciplines still that lack on that end, right? Like especially when you look into engineering degrees, right? Most people don't have like their portfolio, but if you ask them, hey, what have you built? And they said, oh, I built this car, whatever kind of piece, and I built this reactor for whatever kind of piece. You see, I'm not a best engineer to describe this, but there's quite often still like this focus on paper, right? Where you have like your degree, where you have like your credentials in a way. But it starts to shift definitely, because I think also, again, depending on where you are on the planet, right? This is not a global global case here, but if you look especially into Europe, right, where we have a constant shortage of talent, where we have a constant shortage of also young people taking over positions, there you see that companies figure out that they probably need some kind of a better system also to attract global talent, and probably need to also go on a path that hasn't been explored in that much detail before. I think the main problem we still see here is how do you recruit actually people then, right? Which feeds back directly to the HR question, because how do you select the right candidate for a job? Right. I think that's like one of the most beautiful questions most HR people are looking at. And you always come, at least that's my take on it, right? If you want to do good recruiting, it takes time, and it takes effort, and it also takes like some dedication to that.
Right.
What we see right now is more like the systematic approach to HR, right? Where we put this into some kind of a dedicated department that do like the pre-screening, and do like the assessment center, and only if the candidate is like maybe a match, they start getting into like
What about
the
technology?
interviews with the teams, right?
Right. I mean, there's a whole buzz of technology within HR, and I wonder, can it actually help in finding the right candidates?
I think it's a philosophical question, right? Because ultimately, right now it's still like we work with humans. So I think teams should be built on some kind of a human-centric approach, at least for the moment. It's not clear how this will emerge over the next 3 years or 5 years, or even probably the next year, right? Because maybe your next coworker might be an artificial intelligence or a robot or whatever. I mean, we see exciting developments on that end, which then puts a completely different question anyway into the room. But this would be probably now going into a completely different direction for this conversation. I think technology can help to a certain degree, right? But we see this also at universities. And there's like always this discussion now with especially like ChatGPT, right? How do we make sure that's original work of students? Well, there's tools out there. I mean, there's checkers for AI, right? So there's an AI that detects if an AI has written something, which is quite interesting from the fact itself, right? So because it just like evolves to the next technology level, right? So that we control technology with technology. So it will build up, right? And then it will be the next level of saying like, okay, and then we control this technology also with another technology. So where's the point, right? And the question here, and this feeds directly into the skill question, right? To say like, if you can, so if we see that something like writing an assignment with ChatGPT, if we see this as a risk to the way academia works, the way outcomes are being produced, it's not that we should blame the technology, it's probably the way we should blame the system, right? Because ultimately it doesn't matter. What do you want, right? Do you want someone to write a great assignment by themselves? Do you want to have someone that writes a great assignment by technology, or do you just want to have a great assignment? You just want to have a great assignment, right? You don't care about the other aspect. It's all about, in this case, the outcome or the output that someone is producing. You can just like argue someone that uses AI and gets a good result out of something like ChatGPT is probably superior to someone who can't, because they probably, like the one that gets a good result, knows how to ask at least a good question to a technology or a machine. So the interaction level is much better, right? Or to put it into the 90s context, the equivalent to that is Excel, right? Yes, it's great if you know all the formulas for your discounted cash flow or whatever and know how to type them into your calculator. Someone that comes around the corner with Excel and can do this in an Excel module probably doesn't know the formula in the head, but still comes to probably even a superior result compared to that before, right? So this is the evolution of skills. And let's be honest, in most educational systems, at least the traditional ones, we're still measuring on just like giving answers based on something that we save. And we know basically since we have computers that computers are superior to every human being on saving data.
So if we can wrap up this whole part, what is the role of an educator now?
It's a changing role right now. And I think like the role of an educator is probably becoming more relevant than ever before. And I think we should also appreciate the role of the educator way more. And at the same time, we should probably also look at the educator at everybody. I think everybody nowadays is in some way an educator, right? It's not like we're putting it into, oh, there's a professor, there's like the teacher or something like that. Everybody has nowadays something that they can share. And I think it's really important that we create like this sharing mindset of not only knowledge, but also skills and start collaborating on certain things. So the role of the educator becomes a little bit different, right? I think the concept that we used to have of putting 30 people, 100 people, 200 people into a room and putting one person in the front and this person just like talking about something or just like sharing knowledge is a module that don't necessarily work. We can scale this much better, right? We can like the absolute knowledge we can make accessible basic for everybody on this planet, literally for free, right? Because we just need to do it to capture the content one time and just bring it out in like a video form or on a written paper, whatever. So there's no need more for that part. But what is needed is what do you do actually with this knowledge, right? How do you shape an idea out of that? How do you create a project out of that? How do you engage a team? And therefore, I think the new educator is someone on the one hand side that loves to learn for himself or herself, and then also to share. And I think 4 fundamental skills will be important to teach and to embrace and also to learn more about. And one is the whole part about thinking, right? The problem nowadays that we see is that people are not necessarily thinking about stuff, right? This is like the topic about ChatGPT, right? Why do we see this as a problem for assignment writing in this case? Yes, because it is basically breaking the current system, right? But the real question we should ask, right? How can we create a better system, right? How can we embrace progress that we make in order to come to probably a better outcome, right? So it's like this urge to help people challenge everything, question everything, and come up with new plausible explanations of what is possible, right? So the whole part about asking questions, thinking analytically, and challenging what's going on, I think is like one of the big pillars we see educators are going to focus more on. The second thing is how do you help people to actually express what they are thinking, right? Your opinion, my opinion, this is okay, right? People have different perceptions of the world depending on what they learned, where they're coming from, what their beliefs are. And none of those beliefs and none of those knowledge might be right or wrong, right? There's just like different kind of opinions, right? And one of those beautiful things about opinion is if you understand the opinion of the other person, you can start discussing. This is a skill that we fundamentally lack also in our society often, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm for this and I'm for that, and your opinion doesn't matter and this opinion doesn't matter. So like people are just like fighting rather than saying, I'm here, I'm there. So where do we find the concept, right?
Yeah, more than ever, we're seeing more of these clashes of opinions and people unable to express themselves. Actually, I don't have a statistic, but it seems like there's a lot of antagonistic opinions online.
Yeah, and this is good to have different opinions, right? But we need to bring this different opinion, saying like, okay, let's discuss, let's find a common ground, because between this and that opinion, there is something in between there, right? And it's either about
there isn't. It seems like there isn't a way to find a common ground. It seems like there's this opinion and that opinion, and it's just clashing. It seems it's a bit difficult. Coming back to your point about expressing ourselves, it's a bit difficult to express how we feel and stand by ourselves, but by what we think is right, without clashing and just outlying the others, and just like your opinion is invalid. It doesn't matter to me. It's just my way or the highway. And it seems like
exactly. And then we try to countermeasure this with training programs, right? So my favorite is always like 3-day empathy training for managers, which is like, for me, it's like the most ridiculous thing that we have invented probably in the educational space, right? Because what we actually want to achieve right on this end is that people are in a dialogue, right? So that, because probably what feels good for you in a certain situation feels bad for someone else. right? What people are perceiving as something comfortable probably might be not comfortable for others, right? Because we have all different kind of ways of working, right? And this is totally fine and living as well, right? Some people are enjoying it to go out and have a wild party in a bar, right? Others don't like that, so they are not comfortable in this environment, and we should appreciate both sides, right? Both sides are okay, but the question is, how do we balance this out, right? And in the work context, just if you think about like the whole thing about like startup culture, right, where everybody's now best friend and everybody's hanging around after work and sharing meals and stuff, like, yes, all cool, but there's also a whole lot of people that probably don't want to do that, right? They want to say, it's 5 o'clock, I want to go home and leave me alone with your after work party or whatever. So like expressing thoughts, sharing ideas, expressing ideas, making them understandable, I think is really, really important. And if we can connect on some kind of like a shared understanding, I think this is great. And this is like not a one-way street, right? It's not only about me expressing my thoughts in a way that someone else understands it, but also the other person, so to say, right? To say like, hey, I don't understand what you mean with it. Can you explain this a little bit more? But we lost a little bit like this curiosity probably to go deeper, right? And I think like short content media is not doing it, right? We watch now 30-second videos on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and perceive us as an expert afterwards and falling for this expert trap all the time without having like this deep dive onto that. And I think educators can really help onto that, right? To like say, hey, explain me what you really want with that, and then challenge on how we can make this clear to more people. Which brings me directly to the third point, right? How do you foster some kind of a team or like a flow in the team? Right now, it brings me back a bit to a question. Right now, we're still mainly working with humans, even though we have quite a lot of technological intersections now, but they're not so intensive right now, right? But with the humans that we're working, we should make it as a team, right? It's not me against you. It should be always together. And this has a completely new understanding of the role of careers as well, right? Because we probably also need to think about the systematic or the system of how do you make a career. Right now, making a career always means climbing up the ladder, right? It's like taking on the next management role, taking on the VP role, taking on the whatever role. So the career perception nowadays is up. But why? So why can't you just like stay in the position that you are, right? Why can't you be in this one and make a career there? And I think this misunderstanding that we have there is on the one hand side that we create this competitiveness, which is good, right? I think having a little bit of competition always helps to go a little bit the extra mile and just like putting a little bit of more extra effort in. So I think it's good to have like a little bit of a competition, but it shouldn't be like a winner takes all, right? Because as soon as this comes onto like this tipping point where it becomes so competitive that teams are starting to work against each other, or even worse, within the team against each other, then we have a problem.
As I said, careers always up, but if an individual has a purpose, it doesn't have to go up. It can actually be horizontal. Am I correct?
Yeah, so I think there's like so many opportunities, right, on what a career can mean, right? And like there's like so many people that also don't want to take on, for example, management responsibility, right? Being the CEO is always cool until you are the CEO, right? And being responsible for other people is also it's changing jobs. And I think especially from the management perspective, we should appreciate management more as some kind of a job that you need to learn, right? Because becoming a manager is my favorite example onto that, is being perceived as something that someone knows, right? So you take the sales department, for example, right? The person that is the best seller gets promoted as the manager of the sales team. So it basically takes out this activity of selling, right? I'm just like making this really simple, right? So the person that was selling the most of your product is now in a position where he or she is not going to sell anything anymore because they are now busy with managing the team. And this is a completely different skill. And then some people send them to business school, right? And some other companies send them to a management, whatever kind of training weekend, and then this is gone. But this is also something that we constantly need to train. I think this is something where we can learn a lot from engineering degrees and also in the software development. There's like this urge to constantly learn about certain things. In management positions, we're still preaching modules from the 90s, sometimes even older, sometimes even of times where we didn't have a computer, right? And a lot of the structures we see currently in organizations are built on a non-technical understanding or not non-technical possibility. Right now, we have completely different technological possibilities to structure organizations, to automate decision making. Right? There's like so many possibilities that we haven't yet translated into reality, but will certainly come. And this will be quite an exciting time. We're still a little bit away from that. Right. But we can see, and everybody that believes in technological progress to a certain degree will come to the conclusion that we will see more technology-driven management structures. Right. Yeah? Technology is basically replacing management completely in the organization.
That would be challenging, but let's see. So the first point was to think critically, and the second was to express ourselves. Third was how to express ourselves. What's the fourth point?
So the last one is actually ownership or responsibility, right? And in some way also like believing in yourself, right? So trusting your decision in some way.
A big one.
It's a big one. It's an absolute big one. And it comes back a little bit to this art of we are so much trained on giving answers, right? That we're quite often forgetting to just like step back and just like say, oh, hey, slowly, right? Let's give me a week. I will think about it, and then I come back, right? Which is nothing bad. So on the one hand side, like believing in yourself, I think is an important factor. But then also, if someone takes a decision to take this responsibility of this decision and the outcomes for the good and the bad, right? Quite often what we see is that people are stuck because they are afraid of the consequences. We quite often talk about failure culture on that end, but this is I think that's a term that we should kill completely in organizations because we don't want to have a failure culture, right? We want to have a learning culture. We don't want to fail, right? This is like the worst thing that you can do as a company. And I always come to this point where, so like, imagine you have an airline pilot, right? What you don't want to do or what you want to have with this pilot is when the pilot is about to land in, I don't know, Dubai airport, right? That he or she comes with an announcement saying like, hey, by the way, my passengers, today I'm feeling like super excited. I want to try out a new maneuver and see if I can land the airplane also the other way around. You don't want to have this in there, right? Because you want to have a performance culture of saying like this person sitting there flying into Dubai knows exactly how we make it safe and sound to the ground. If the same person is sitting in the simulator, you want them to do exactly that, right? To say like, okay, how can I try different kind of things out? So you want to embrace people to practice in a safe manner, right? And you want to embrace people also to try out stuff that is high risk, but in a safe environment, so like reduce risk in some way. But when it's about performance, you want to have the performance, right? And then you need people that say, this was my decision, and I stand for this decision. Yes, it probably was not a good decision. That's a different story. But taking this responsibility for that and then not being striked for that, I think is really, really important. Because if we create a culture where we don't embrace failure, right, but the learning out of that and encourage people to take bold decisions, then we can progress. And if we combine this whole thing with this understanding of minimizing risk, then even better.
Right. This was great. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation.